Hello, everybody. My name is Nia Sheely.
My name is Gabby Kulikowski.
I'm Avery Boucher.
Andrew Schwartz.
And welcome to our presentation. Entrepreneurship is not just about starting a business. It's about building a mindset that embraces growth, resilience, and self-leadership. Through this activity, we explored the differences between fixed and growth mindsets, the importance of habits and identity, and how tools like fear setting can help overcome the fear of failure. By breaking down these concepts into practical steps and real-world examples, we begin to see how adopting an entrepreneurial mindset is less about innate talent and more about consistent actions, self-awareness, and the willingness to learn from challenges.
So the first bullet we're going to be talking about is discussing the differences between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset and how to break the habit. So I'm going to start and talk about kind of like the difference. So as a core, a fixed mindset is the belief that your abilities, intelligence, or talents are static. Basically that you're born with a certain level of skill or intelligence and that's it. So if you fail a math test, you might think I'm just not a math person, or if you're not good at a sport, you just assume that you'll never be good at a sport. On the other hand, a growth mindset is the belief that you can develop and improve your abilities through effort, practice, and learning. It's not about ignoring your current limitations, it's about realizing that they aren't permanent. A growth mindset understands that challenges are part of the process, and failure is not a sign of being not smart. It's just a signal to try a new strategy or work harder.
Well, for example, growth mindset is going to encourage risk-taking and a lifelong embrace of change, whereas a fixed mindset often leads to what we call comfort zone behavior. When it comes to a growth mindset, feedback is welcome, seen as useful for improvement. It's taken personally or as a criticism. With a fixed mindset, a growth mindset opens far more doors than otherwise, and a fixed mindset has been seen to lead to widespread stagnation in one's entrepreneurial journey.
And what's really powerful about this is that this idea is actually scientifically supported. So brain imaging studies have shown that when people with a growth mindset receive feedback, especially feedback that helps them improve, their brains actually light up. They're actively engaged in the learning process. Meanwhile, people with a fixed mindset tend to tune out when they hear that they've made a mistake. They see failure as a reflection of who they are and not as a step towards growth. And it's not about just school or intelligence. A growth mindset applies to problem solving, sports, learning an instrument, public speaking, you name it, it's pretty much anything. For example, an athlete with a growth mindset that doesn't give up when they hit a plateau is like a good example because they're going to learn from that and grow from that. They analyze what went wrong, they adjust their training, and they push forward. That mindset of persistence and adaptability is what leads to long-term success. And in fact, in a study of seventh graders, researchers found that students with a fixed mindset tend to struggle with improving their grades over time, and they hit a wall. But students who believed they could grow their intelligence actually improved their academic performance steadily. And the key difference is that they saw effort as a path to mastery, not as a sign of weakness.
All in all, a growth mindset is a belief that skills and intelligence can be improved through effort, learning, persistence. So failure is seen as a chance to grow. In contrast, a fixed mindset is the belief that talents and intelligence are set and can't really change. So people tend to avoid challenges or give up when things get difficult. A growth mindset is all about trying, learning from feedback, and not being afraid to fail or being afraid of stagnation, because stagnation is guaranteed with a fixed mindset.
So how do we start to break the habit of a fixed mindset? First, you want to notice the voice in your head. A fixed mindset thought often kind of sound like I'm just not good at this, or I'll never be as smart as them. And once you catch that voice, you want to challenge it. You can reframe it to something like I'm not there yet, but I can learn how to get there. Second, make feedback about the process, not just the result. Whether you're giving or receiving feedback in school, at work, or even in personal goals, focus on strategies, effort, and progress. For example, instead of saying, you're so smart, say, you worked really hard on that strategy and it's paying off. Third, teach others that abilities can change. Whether it's a friend, a teammate, or a student, share the science behind brain plasticity. The brain is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Neural connections grow stronger with practice, and yes, we can actually rewire how we think and perform. And finally, embrace failure as feedback. A growth mindset sees mistakes as data, not personal judgment, just information. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What could I try differently next time? Pretty much to sum it up, the growth mindset is not just a feel-good idea. It's a powerful, science-backed approach to learning, performance, and personal development. And the great news is we're not stuck with one mindset. We can learn to shift. We can train our brains, reshape how we think, and unlock potential we didn't even realize that we had.
And then moving on to the next question, if you guys are good with that. The question is, do you agree or disagree with James Clear's idea that our actions, what we do, defines our identity? And what does this mean for the perception of our ability to be an entrepreneur? And it's just reminding us to recall that being an entrepreneur doesn't mean starting a business. And basically, I do agree personally, and I think we all did as well, that James Clear's idea of our actions defining our identity is very accurate and can be applied to multiple aspects of life. And I can see this through the way that someone can become someone new based on the consistency and repetition of certain tasks and actions that they do every day. And that can accumulate the bulk of evidence that you believe in, essentially. And in that case, it defines your identity because of your beliefs and your values. And that's really important to becoming who you are. Like, think about every time you practice a hobby or activity, it's adding to your identity. Like, athletes practice sports, so that makes them who they are, an athlete. Like, for example, when I play lacrosse, I feel that I work hard and I have dedication, and I'm continuing to do that over and over again through repetitive tasks of practice, and that adds to my identity as a whole and is then displayed in other tasks I do, like school, work, other things. And then another example of how my personal actions define my identity is when I help others with class assignments. This not only adds to my overall knowledge as a student, and shows my competence in the subject that I was helping in, but it also shows that I could be a reliable person that others can count on, and overall this adds to my identity as both a friend and a student. And I think that it also connects in a way to entrepreneurial principles, because if you practice those entrepreneurial principles over and over again, it'll add to your thoughts and your confidence on idea formulation and your overall entrepreneurship abilities. And then kind of a question that was also asked was, how is an entrepreneurial mindset related to habits and self-leadership? And overall, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I know that seems cliche and a little broad, but genuinely it just highlights that what you do and your actions really do define your identity. And I think specifically an entrepreneurial mindset really has to have those strong, consistent habits, like creative problem solving and such like that in just everyday life, not just when you're trying to be an entrepreneur or trying to find those different ways to be creative, but in everyday life to solve your problems. And I think that habits that create that discipline turns those ideas into action, like finally creating that solution instead of just thinking about it and not planning for it. And I think that self-leadership really drives that motivation without external guidance, because you don't need anyone else, because once again, it's just about your identity and your identity only. So like being self-aware of that is really important. And I think that specifically being an entrepreneur really doesn't matter about titles or owning a business, but more on our actions and what we do. Like when we take initiative and solve problems or come up with those creative solutions I was saying in daily life, it's just all the reinforcement that we are entrepreneurs when we do those things. And one may ask, like, how do you really develop that entrepreneurial mindset then? Like, how do you take an average person who just lives their everyday life and make them have that entrepreneurial mindset? Small productive habits compound over a long period of time, and basically those habits that you develop continue to make your entrepreneurial mindset grow bigger and bigger and lead you to that mindset that you're looking for. And I think that taking small risks in everyday life is really important to becoming an entrepreneur, like starting a side project or sharing an idea in class or even making something homemade and trying to sell it or give it to people. I think it really helps you see yourself and has others see yourself as resourceful and proactive as an individual, which are both qualities that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have. And I think that each action really reinforces the habit of problem solving and allows you to build resilience and helps you when those setbacks happen so you're not scared of failure. And more on that, we'll get into the idea that fear should not be holding you back and a plan to try to keep you going no matter if failure will occur or when failure will occur. It's still important to developing that entrepreneurial mindset.
So with that being said, we heard a very powerful testimony by the speaker who told us about fear setting. So fear setting, basically establishing this, would help you realize that your fears can be super unrealistic at times. It could be that anxiety that's like building up in your head, like what could happen, like what could go wrong. By doing this process, basically what it is you define the fear. So you ask yourself, like, what is the worst case scenario that can happen in this situation? Next, you identify how to prevent this action, like how can I stop this from happening? And then you start to plan some repair steps of like, what do I do if this happens? And so by writing these down and defining them and coming up with a plan, you're more likely to prevent these fears, but also know how to overcome them. Here's an example that we came up with, starting a business. So the worst case of this fear would probably be, I'll just lose all of my money and look like failure. What you can do to prevent this, or what you can write down as your way to prevent this from happening, is to start small. Maybe create a budget, maybe ask mentors for advice, talk to people in the field about what you should do. And then if something does go wrong, get another job. Use the skills that you gained in originally starting this process, and then try again with a new idea. There's always a solution. What you would realize, like, by this situation is that failing is not permanent, and it could even lead to growth. Another example would be traveling alone. The worst case is I will get lost literally in a country that I do not know about. What you can do to prevent this happens way too often. What you can do to prevent this is you can download some offline maps. You can print out a little map if you know how to read maps. You can learn key phrases like where the bathroom is or like where to ask for help. What you can do to like help yourself to like repair this, basically ask for directions, call a hotel, maybe find a translator if you can, or just use the GPS on your phone. I feel like we all have that nowadays. That would definitely help us. So like what you would realize after that is like getting lost, it's not claustrophobic, it's pretty solvable.
Catastrophic?
Claustrophobic would probably be fear of having fear, so this is what we're not doing. So like why this fear setting works is it shows that most fears are not as bad as they are in your head. It's so easy to like have this fear and keep thinking about it and like build it up, and it becomes a lot more scary than it ever originally should have ever been. It also helps create steps so you feel more prepared and in control. I feel like once you start this process and you identify and then you find ways to prevent and like what would happen if it goes wrong, it kind of just lays it all out for you. You will be feeling prepared. You will be feeling like you're in control. Now, like, there's a cost of action and a cost of inaction. This was understood in the TED Talk. Basically, the cost of action would be temporary risk or discomfort. I mean, I feel like everybody needs to take a risk these days, and it's gonna feel not comfortable at first. But if you were to not take action at all, you could have some long-term regret, you have some huge missed opportunities, or you can just stay stuck in where you're at right now. Nobody wants to feel like they're stuck. That's why the cost of action is way better than the cost of inaction. Like, do something about it, you know? So fear setting does not increase fear, it reduces it by shining light on it. It helps reframe fears as challenges with solutions rather than roadblocks. Super important. There can always be a solution. So, like, how can we overcome the fear of failure? You can always use the failure as feedback. You can see the mistakes as lessons rather than endings, just like we just talked about. You can break big goals into small steps. Make it easier for you. Like, make it something that you can do a little bit easier, and you can save yourself some stress. Prepare and plan. That could go into the whole small steps thing as well. Having a strategy, it can definitely increase your confidence in what you're doing. If you practice this regularly, practice fear setting, you can write down the worst case scenarios and then come up with solutions. Of course that's beneficial. We've been talking about that basically the whole time. Visualize yourself, visualize success. It can be hard until it's easy. Once you know, like, yes, there is a way that I can succeed. Come up with a plan, take your time, and that's all you need.
Yeah, and I think overall what we learned from these videos is how important the mindset is when it comes to success and creating those ideas. And being an entrepreneur obviously focuses all around the mindset and why it's so important. So I think it's very beneficial to our understanding of entrepreneurial mindsets. Thank you.
Thank you.